All right. Thank you for being in our session. We are really happy to see you there. My name is Doria. I'm a Salesforce MVP. I'm also an architect. I have quite of activities in the community. And today I will present it with my partner in crime, Fabrice.
So I'm Fabrice. So I'm a tech lead Salesforce instructor. I'm a metadata lover. And that's the reason we are speaking today regarding the tooling API. It's just a way to show you how you can use it easily. So don't worry, it will be a bit technical at the beginning. Doria will do it. And after we go directly inside the easy part, which is SQL. And we'll try to show you different SQL queries you can directly use. You don't have to you copy paste the queries, and you can use them in your project. Okay? So.
It's always the same. We are always struggling with the slide during the presentation, don't worry. So we have this session in 3 parts. First, I will just introduce the concept of APIs because this session is focused on admins. Of course, if you're a developer, you know what an API is, but let's keep into the concept and then go to the tooling API, explain why to use it, how to use it, and then, as Fabrice said, we will have some use cases that you can use on the project. You can make picture of the screen, but at the end of the presentation, you will have a downloadable link for the presentation, so that will be easier. All right, maybe first a question, who is a developer? Because it's focused on any. Okay, so we have developers. How to explain an API? For example, I take the same example for a restaurant. When you go to the restaurant, you are not going straight to the kitchen to get your dish. You are asking the waiter for something, and you have a menu with all the options. It's not that you have the opportunity to go straight to the resources. Well, in fact, when you use an API, it's pretty the same. You are going to ask for the API something to get data, to update the data, to delete the data. It's basically a way to access the data from one system to another system without access it straightly. It's also a way to secure the data and also to materialize the effort you have to build because you build one API. Sorry. You have to build only one service, and then it can be used from many different systems. In the Salesforce world, we have different kind of APIs. It depends on what you want to achieve. For example, you can access the data. To do that, we have the REST and the SOAP API, basically the same, but only different way of coding them. The syntax is not the same. You have also the bulk API. It's also to get data, but the bulk API is done for a large volume of data in one single call. And then we have also other kind of API, for example, the streaming API. If you are used to work with flows and with platform event is one of the API. The way of using the streaming API. So behind platform event, you have the streaming API. And the streaming API is there. For example, if you want to update something on the screen of your user in real time, something is happening behind the scene, and you want to show it on the screen, then you use the streaming API. Finally, you have the metadata. So it's not about what the user is doing. It's not about the data. It's really on the configuration, so your application itself. And for this, we have 2 kinds of APIs. We have the metadata API, and we have the tooling API. So when we speak about metadata, it's pretty simple to understand. If you are able to export something from your org, then it's data, and all the rest, configuration, development, anything in your system is metadata. So basically, when you deploy something from an environment to another one, it's called metadata, just to be clear about the concept. We saw that there are two kinds of API related to metadata, the Metadata API and then the Tooling API. Don't be afraid, it's the last kind of technical slide for this presentation. We can use them both, but the usage is not the same. For example, you will use the Metadata API if you have only access to SOAP. And for the Tooling API, this is what we will see today. Of course, they can be called in SOAP and in REST, but also through queries. So you can use a simple query to get the data. Another difference is that for the Metadata API, like you see on the screen, you retrieve the result in a kind of node. So parent and child information. And for the Tooling API, you retrieve everything in kind of table or list. So it's a flat result that you get. The Metadata API is more used for migration, and the Tooling API is used for, let's say, configuration review, security, development purpose, but not really for migration, because of course, also the Metadata API is slower than the Tooling API. Let's say you will have everything in the Metadata API, but you will get more detailed or granular information in the Tooling API. This is basically the main differences between the two.
I wouldn't say so. I would say that Metadata API can give you all the information, but it will be hard to read because it will be XML file, where the Tooling API will provide you some information, but in a tabular way, so you can filter them as we show you, things like this. Other things you have to know is if you want to grab the file name or the full name, you have to go through the Metadata API. You won't have this information easily with the Tooling API. So if this is what you want, Metadata API is the one you need to use. Except this, you can use the Tooling API for most of the information you could need. And if you read on some detailed information, you will go back to Metadata API. It's the easiest way to do it.
Now, that being said, it was quite technical. Let's dive into the real subject of this session. Why to use it? As we said, there are many different purposes related to your profile. For example, the developers will basically use it to be sure everything is running the right way on the org. Running tests, debug, searching for things related to the development, this kind of thing. On the admin side, you will be more looking for the health check of your org. Be sure that the best practices are followed the right way. For example, be sure there is a description everywhere. You don't have any field that is not used anymore in your org. This is typically the kind of thing that you can achieve with the Tooling API. Of course, you can do that manually, but we are here to boost your performance and to give you some tips to gain some time. So we will now see all the example of the application of the Tooling API. We say that we can have REST or SOAP code for the Tooling API, but for all this example, we'll only use the queries. So it's a simple way to retrieve the data. And of course, you need to know the tool that you have at your disposal to retrieve the results. So if you already work with Workbench, it's a way to retrieve Tooling API results, but you will have to go through the REST API. So if you're a developer, it's okay. If you're an admin, I guess it will be easier to go to the developer console. So in the developer console, as you can see, you You can query a global object like you used to do. And to query the tooling API, you have an option at the bottom of the screen, use tooling API, that you have to check. And once it's
this part.
yeah, and once it's checked, then you are basically using the object specific to the tooling API.
And Doria said developer will use Workbench. That's not true. Developer will never use Workbench to do query tool. We prefer other tools than Workbench. Writing a query with Workbench is a nightmare. So if I have to do this, it's really because I'm desperate.
There are also other tools that you can use if you want to query basic queries of the records or the tooling API info. You can use Inspector. If you have Inspector installed, it's the same. You have only to... But it's off. So you have to check the checkbox once again for the tooling API, and there are also other tools available built by technical people. For example, this one was built from the city of Capgemini, Admin Booster, and it's also a great tool because you can query and then directly download all your records in Excel from the results you get.
So first thing you will need to grab when you will work with tooling API is entity definition is the key. It's the major table you will have to master. So here we are just trying to provide you a quick example. So what we wanted to show you is how it's working, and then we will show you what are the important fields that you need to master on entity definition. So here is it. So here you have, I just need to go there, I cannot see what I have to speak. So the idea is really, you have 4 fields you need to master, which are the developer name, durable ID, master label, and qualified API name. So if you're working with standard object, the developer name, the durable ID, the master label, and qualified API name are always the same, so don't be surprised. But as soon as you will jump on custom object, all the name will change, and especially the durable ID. So the durable ID for an entity definition ID is the real ID of the object. Entity definition object doesn't really have an ID, okay? And there is one big issue if you are working with developer console. If you put the ID inside your query, Salesforce is not able to provide the result properly, so avoid to use the ID when you're querying entity definition object within developer console, or Salesforce will only return the first line and will hide all the other values. I just discovered this a few days ago because I'm never using developer console. But as I was preparing the example, I've just discovered that developer console has an issue with this, okay? So if you want to grab information on entity definition ID, never put the ID, it will be better and it's useless, okay? Then I give you 2 examples where you will either use the entity definition ID or what we call tab or enum ID. I will just come to it after. So entity definition ID will be the easiest way to filter your different objects. So I just provide here an example. You will see just a bit later on in detail. But for example, if I want to grab the custom field for a specific object, you can filter the query just by using the entity definition ID. Then you can put whatever you prefer. You can go for the developer name, for the master label, the qualified API name. So it's very easy to use. You don't need to have the durable ID to work with this type of object. If you want to go for a specific object, I give another one, which is profile layout, that we will show also today. This object doesn't use the entity definition ID. It just uses what we call the table or enum ID, which is a nightmare for me because there is no way to refine it. You have to provide the durable ID of the object. Okay? So if it's the standard object, it will be the name of the object. But as soon as it will be a custom object, you will have to find first the durable ID of the object. Then you can use the filtering. Okay? So just be aware. It was really what was difficult for me when I started was what is a table or enum ID, where can I get it? Once you're used to it, it's very easy. But you need to figure out how it's working. Okay? So that's why I'm really insisting on this slide. It's really the key features of the tooling API is here. As soon as you start to understand this, you can do almost what you want within the tooling API with so-called queries.
It might sound really tricky, right, to understand, but we will use some example to illustrate what we are talking about.
Okay, and if you have questions at the end regarding what I said now, we can go back on this slide or whatever. But I think the next slides will go in depth regarding this subject, but I really wanted to introduce this so that it's easier for you after.
First example, if you have custom fields, and of course you have on your org, and you want to check that the best practices are followed. One of them are, is there a description on the custom field? Because you need to put it. So if you want to check in one glance for all your objects having custom fields, if a description is filled in, this is a kind of query that you can use. So basically you will have the ID of the field, and you know all this field, the created by, the name, the created date, modified, blah, 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 all this kind of field. Of course, also the description. And you will query the custom field object to retrieve all this information. As we just said previously, we need also to know on which object these fields were created, and this is why we use the EntityDefinition.developer name. That will allow you to retrieve the standard name object, or also the custom name of the object, and not the ID, because it's unreadable if you are using the ID. So it's better to go for the developer name. All right?
Okay. As long as we don't say there is a limit, it means there is no limit. So if you go for your custom field, Salesforce will bring all the custom fields you have within your organization. So if you have 50,000 custom fields, Salesforce will bring them back once. It will not ask you to filter anything. If you go in standard, you can query the field definition table. But if you go for the field definition table in standard, you have to provide the object. Salesforce will not let you have access to all the field definition. When you're in tooling API, if you go for custom field, you have access to all the custom fields. Okay? No need to filter anything. Salesforce doesn't care. So it's a really big difference. So that's why I prefer to use custom field to field definition when I need to figure out what's happening with my custom field. Okay?
Another thing useful when you are performing security check or global health check of your org is to know the sharing model, specifically if you are on the org where the communities were activated a few months or a few years ago, before the last releases, I guess 3 releases now. When you activated the community, all the objects were basically open to the external profile. So if you want to check how to retrieve all the sharing model for the internal and external at the same time, you can query the entity definition, basically, so the object, and then retrieve the internal sharing model, external sharing model, and you will have the 2 information. Of course, you can also go to the setup, sharing, and then retrieve all this information. But here, what we are trying to perform is to get some queries that you can run from the same place, so from the developer console, and get all the information back. Also, you're an admin, but you can also build some queries and ask, for example, for your developer to run these queries and that they are sent by email, for example. So it's always better to run this kind of test or process or check from the same interface, rather than having to go through all the objects. Okay, do I have a custom field? The definition is fulfilled, yes or no. Then checking the sharing model, you have to go back and forth into the setup. So this is a way to go quicker.
And to be lazy.
And to be lazy, of course.
That's what we like to be.
Same for the search and reporting and other kind of information. When we build a custom object, basically we have to tell this object will be searchable. On this object you will be able to make some report, and sometimes you missed it, or you forgot to check the option, or there was an evolution in your object. This is a way to get all the objects at one time and to check which one is searchable, on which one are you able to run the report. So basically, if you try to do that manually, you will go through all the objects, click the edit object because you don't see it on the screen too, and then check if the options are checked or not. So a quicker way to do that. Also, you see that once again we are querying the identity definition, basically the object, and we are also adding. Gosh, I guess it's my worst session. Imagine my phone is off. We are adding 2 additional conditions. The publisher ID, local, means that we will only keep the object outside the package. And then the qualified name, like _C, because we want only to retrieve the custom object. So excluding all the packaged object, because basically, for almost of them, you cannot add option on the object level, so it's not useful to keep them in the results.
And 2 things I forget. If you go for entity definition, you have them in standard, you have them with tooling API. In standard, you don't see all the entity definition. If you go for tooling API, Salesforce will provide all the metadata type you have inside your org. But there is a limit, I forget, you cannot retrieve more than 2,000 entity definition at once. So if Salesforce is complaining, you will have to filter in order to be below the 2,000 records. Okay. Second thing, and you have an example on this, is we are providing some of the fields you have for an object. We are not providing all the fields of the object. Documentation of Salesforce is very well done. If you want to see what are the different fields on any metadata, go inside the documentation. Salesforce is providing the detailed information for all the fields you can access object by object. And you can figure out which one you want to retrieve during your queries.
Okay, for the validation rule, when you build an application, you also need to think about user experience. And one point of the user experience is to have the same kind of message on the validation rule. You cannot be really, let's say, strict to your user, say, mandatory field. Point, and that's it. For another validation rule, having something like, please fill in this field is missing or something like this. We have to align and have homogeneous messages in your validation rule. So basically, one way to do that is to get all the validation rule messages. So you query the validation rule, and then you get the error message to get all of them, and to be sure everything is aligned. Specifically when you are working on a big project with many admins or members, developers, able to build validation rules.
Okay. And one thing that is very useful with validation rules is often on my project, not sure for yours, but often we have users complaining they have an issue because there is a validation rule that has been fired. And they just provide us the message, and most of the time we don't know where the message is coming from because the error message is not very properly done. If you don't know where the message is coming, you can go through this query, put inside the error message a filter on the message the user is providing, and then you will be able to find which validation rules are corresponding to the message, so it's easier to find where the issue is coming from. Okay? So it's really something we are using on a daily basis because we have, I don't know how many validation rules, nobody knows where they're coming from, so we use this in order to find what object is concerned, what field is concerned. So here you have an example on how you can find, how you can work with layout. So this simple query is able to provide you whichever layout is not used inside your organization, because it's only tracking the layout that are not assigned to a profile and a record type. So if a layout is appearing during this query, it means the layout has not been assigned to any profile and record type. It means the layout is useless. Okay? So it's a quick query that you can run just to check which layout you should either remove or try to figure out why it's still there. Okay? Then, second thing you can do with layout assignment, but you will need two queries, is doing something like this. I think I forget one query. No, that's it. So what you can do is, first you will need to grab the durable ID of the object, because Salesforce will not be able to work with any easy way. So you first need to grab the durable ID of the entity definition. And then you can ask Salesforce to provide you for a specific object all the layout and how the layout are assigned. So you can have here the profile, the record type, and you can then quite easily export them in an Excel file, discuss with your business, or try to realign very quickly the things where within the Salesforce console, when you have a lot of profile, lot of record type, lot of layout, it's very difficult to know where your layout are assigned. Okay? So we are used to work with this query to figure out if the layout are properly assigned to the correct record type, correct profile or not. It's easier for us to work. We extract this in an Excel file, work in the Excel file, then we will go back to Salesforce to correct. But we won't do the exercise within Salesforce, because sometimes we have up to 20 record type and 50 layout, and it's really a nightmare if you have to work on this directly within Salesforce. Okay? So it's typically the type of query that can help you, not on all objects, but for objects that are very complex, it can be very useful.
And if you are asking how you can retrieve this kind of ID in the previous query, you remember the first slide I was talking about, really difficult to understand. Now you will understand the purpose of this slide once you get the presentation back.
And remember, the table or anomaly means durable ID of the entity definition. It's really the tricky part of Salesforce at the beginning.
No process builder anymore. We all agree with that? Okay, so one way to be sure about the automation in place is to query the flow object. Flow includes the process builder and also the flows, not the workflow. For workflow, you have a specific object called workflow. Now, if you want to check all the flows in place in your org, you can simply query of course, a master label and filter by status. Skip all the status having obsolete as value, because you know when you are creating a flow, you can have several versions of your flow, and then the last version becomes activated, and then the others are deactivated. Well, deactivated is obsolete in this kind of table. So to retrieve only one, let's say one single line with the active and inactive flow, just skip all the obsolete, and then you will have also the process type to know if it's a record triggered flow, if it's a process builder, all this kind of information. And one thing that is very interesting to me is the running mode, because it's very simple to bypass all the security and the field settings and everything by running the flow in run mode, but sometimes it's quite dangerous to having it this way, so admin should already be aware of it, and having the running mode will show you if the flow is running in a system context, so skipping all the security settings. It's a good way to make security review. Okay, limits. We are working in a multi-tenant environment, so the limits are always present in Salesforce. And related to the object you are working on, we have several different limits. A way to retrieve them is to query the entity limit. So in one single view, you will have all the limits related to this specific object. And once again, you will have to inform the entity definition ID. It's not possible to say, hey, give me the limits of all my objects. No, that's not possible. You will have to go through one by one and to inform on which object you want to retrieve the limits. That's why we said previously, for some of them, you will be able to retrieve everything, but for some of them, you will have to split it one by one. This kind of query is a good example of it.
And this is typically what you should ask your developer to automatize. On my project, it's automatized. We have the script running every week, and it's just checking which objects are close to some limits. Send us an email just for us to be warned. Okay, so it's useful on a daily basis, but it's really useful if you go for an automatic process that will schedule properly and that will scan your org once a while just to warn you that you are close to some limits so you don't hit the limit before you will be warned that you are close to the limit before hitting the limit. Okay?
Okay. Now, of course, if you are a developer, it's really simple to have kind of Apex script to run more complex logic. But if you are an admin, you are limited in the tools you have. And for example, sometimes I'm running on production environment. I have to download the data, or even I don't have access to the production. I only have access to the metadata. And I need to be able to make real quick check. So sometimes I use Excel to do that, and this is a way of doing it. So for example, in this case, I want to see which field I have created and that are never shown on any layout. So you will use Excel for that. So two steps or three steps. First, you will query all the metadata component dependencies. So it means that I will retrieve the link existing between a layout and the custom field or the standard fields too. So which one is present on which layout? So now I have the list of everything that is included in one layout. This is the first step. The second step is to retrieve all the custom fields. Pretty simple. We already saw it in the last example. I retrieve all my fields. Now I have all the fields. On the other side, I have all the fields included in the layout. So the match is pretty simple to do. VLOOKUP option in Excel, and you're done. No Apex.
And for this, we are sorry, we have to use Excel. So at least admin will have to use Excel. Developers will not use Excel. But admin will not have the choice. But at least it's useful.
So I'm sorry, I won't be able to explain in detail how you will use the VLOOKUP function in Excel, but I guess you will find some info on the internet. Here is a simple example of that. And this is also a way to do it without any Apex. Of course, if you're a developer, you go with a simple map and you're done. That's it. Or, third option, you customize what you want in Excel. You go to your developer and you ask him to develop it.
Yeah. And if they ask you more than 1 hour to do it, just send me an email. We can explain them how to do it in less than 1 hour. It's very easy for a developer to do. So feel free to ask them to do it. It's something they should be able to do. It's very, very easy to do first. So there is one API that you can use, which is the metadata component dependency. It's able to provide you which metadata is used by another metadata, or you can use it to say which metadata is used by my metadata. So for example, you can ask which fields are present inside the page layout. So it's really a useful API, but there is a big warning, and you need to be aware of, is that this API is not able to retrieve more than 2,000 records at once. That's the bad news. And the worst is that if you try to grab more than 2,000 records, you will have no warning. It doesn't care about. It will just retrieve something that seems correct for him, and will return a result. So sometimes you will have 1,652 records. So you think you have everything, and in fact, it's wrong. It's just that there should be 3,000 records. Salesforce doesn't want to provide everything, so it will just grab a part of it, and you can think you have everything, and it's not true. Okay? So if you plan to use it, be aware of this limit, because I kill an algorithm with this one because I was not aware, I was not retrieving everything because I was not filtering enough. And there is no warning, so it's a very tricky one. Except this API is very useful, even if Salesforce has announced that they plan to, it's in beta today. Salesforce has announced that they plan to retire it, but the whole community today is complaining because we want to keep it at least until they provide something better. So the main reason they want to remove it is because it's not used enough. So if you can just use the next query sometimes, just to say to Salesforce, we use it, you will help us, okay? And if you try to like it, you will see that it's really, really useful. Sorry, I thought I put the query. Maybe later. I will try to figure out. But there is a query somewhere we will show you. But if you can really go on this object, it's very easy to use, very useful, especially for developers, because we can build strong algorithm on them. But even as admin, it's a quick way to see, for example, as I said, which fields are used by layout or things like this. Okay? And the more it will be used, the more Salesforce will invest on it, and maybe someday we will have a very nice features that anybody is needing today. Okay? Then, if you are used to work on the release update that you have on the right, it's as a developer and as a tech lead, it's my duty. I hate to focus on this because for me it's really, I'm losing a lot of time if I go to process this. You have the exact same information by a simple query that you can export in an Excel file or whatever, and you can work directly with an Excel file. So I open the screen on the right, but I'm working with an Excel file just to check where I am regarding the release update. Okay? So it's very easy. You have all the information you need. You can know if you have already activated a feature or where you are with the activation. So it's really giving you the information, but in a tabular way. It's easier for people sometimes to work with this one. Okay? Same, if you are working with Sandbox, like many projects today, because not everybody is using Scratch.org, and my duty as a tech lead is to be sure that everybody is refreshing the Sandbox times to times. You can use this simple query just to have an overview of what's happening with your Sandbox. And Salesforce will provide you information on each Sandbox for when it was refreshed the last time. So it's a quick way to see if somebody is not refreshing a Sandbox on a regular basis. So you can ask your team why they're not doing it. Sometimes there is a good reason. Sometimes they just forget to follow the process you have. So again, it's not a query you will use every day, but it can really help you to monitor what's happening with your developers, admin, whatever. Okay?
And same when it was deleted. Was it me? Yes, it was you.
Okay.
Okay, so we really think that the tooling APIs is a great tool to perform configuration and development review. I run it for a while now, and I automated many queries to do that. So basically, I'm really using it. It's not only that I choose to make a presentation that you're dreaming, even if you are really happy to do that. It can be used by everyone. So you only need to know how to query something and You have basically all the queries now in this document. It's possible to automate everything, and it's pretty good documented. It's not like, sometimes the documentation is tricky to understand, but I have to say for the tooling API, it's really easy. You have all the objects, all the fields that you can query, and it's really simple to understand.
Once you start with it, at the beginning it can be scary, but as soon as you will start with it, the more you use it, the more it will be simple for you. It's just a question, try it. When you try it, you will never leave it. And we focused the presentation on tooling API. We should have provided some queries that can be run without the tooling API. It was not the subject, but knows that there is quite a lot of queries that you should also master with simple so-called queries that can even monitor the metadata for you. So tooling API is a part of what we are using on a daily basis, but just consider that there is some queries that you can even use without tooling API. Okay.
So to get a step further, you can try it now. You have a bunch of queries that you can test, but you can also go and work with your developer. As we said, it's just the beginning. You can also ask your developer for some help to build more complex query or to automate things like retrieve the result, for example, in emails or this kind of thing. Do not hesitate to contact your team. And also, on our side, we are open for any question you could have on it. Here are our emails, and the link will provide you an access to the same presentation. So it's the last version you can get. So.
Yeah, and really feel free to reach us if you have questions, because your question may be our question later on. So even if you don't know how to do something, ask us if we can do it. If you have the requirement we will have it later on, sooner or later on. So feel free to ask us, and we'll try to help you. Okay. So.
Any question?
Yeah.
By the entity ID. You mean the from where it started for a recall trigger?
Right. I want to see all flows and process builders on a given object.
Yeah.
You can filter it by the entity definition ID.
Yeah.
Non, c'était plus tard.
I think you were showing it with the
So.
as not obsolete.
Yes, I don't know if it. I don't remember if it's available. The.
Yeah. Sorry. It's after. Elle est où, Doria, tu te rappelles?
Après.
Après? Non,
Oh, non, avant.
Ah, je vais dire. Non, parce que je sais pas. Yeah. Yeah, you have to use, that's why I wanted the query, because there is different type of flow, and the type will tell you which, so flow is a flow, workflow is a process builder. You have, I think you have this on the slide here. So
I don't know if we are able to retrieve the triggering object for the. I'm not sure it's right in the field, but maybe in the meta, because also you have a metadata field including other sub-info on your object, so maybe it's there. Like you will have, for example, other info about number of elements, the triggering record, so you have it, but you have to pass the metadata information.
Yeah, I'm not sure 100%, but I think the object is in there, and if there is no object related, it will say you there is no object related. So I'm quite sure the object is part of this, the type of object is part of the fields of the flow metadata. So I hope we didn't scare you with this, but it's really useful, very easy to use, and really try it. Once you use it, it's really addictive.
I have a question. This has nothing to do with the SOAP that you showed. I was not aware of the relevant modes. Where can
Sorry?
The rugged mode that you're showing here, and you were saying that this can cause serious security breaches and other problems, but where does that exist?
When you go to, when you have your flow, you go to the settings of your tool, like the name, the version, and the API. Then you have also run in, and you have without sharing or run as user. And that's why I say when you bypass and you say, okay, I want to run system mode and bypass.
And it's a tricky one. Yeah. And it's a tricky one because, like you, I just discovered this quite recently. I was not aware there was a way to say I want or I don't want to use it. So it's really useful to have this like this because you can quickly review your flow in once.
But sometimes it's useful. For example, if you, sorry, Salesforce, but it's recorded. Sometimes if you want to bypass a license issue, you can use a flow on a community, for example. And you run it in the system mode, and then you have access to all the reports, even if you are not a connected community member.
Okay, just to give a case scenario, once I needed to add bypass to every validation rule, and I did exactly the same query as you did for validation, where it gives developer name, it gives error message. I wanted to go further and find actually body of validation, just to see if there is validation or not.
The validation itself, you mean?
Yeah. I don't remember the name of the field, but it's certainly there. And once I tried to query it, it gave me an error saying that there is limit only for one query.
Yeah, because in order to get this, you need to go through the metadata field. And if you, by default, if you want the metadata for a tooling object, you will have to provide the exact ID you want to watch. Salesforce will not let you select metadata from all the object. You have to say which one you want to audit. It's really something that is painful because if it's, you have to go one by one if you want to see the metadata. So that's it. Yeah, it's really something we don't like, but there's an issue.
Just to bring everybody at the same level, for example, in this, you have fields, specific field for all the information, but you also have a field for metadata, where it's like you have a bunch of information put in there, and yeah, you can use it, but you have to parse it because it's not directly accessible from the object. This is where Fabrice said, if you want to access the metadata, it's only one record at a time.
After, if you're developers, it's very easy to bypass the limit by just grabbing the ID of all the objects and then going for one query for each object at the same. And I'm used to do this, but you need to be a developer if you want to bypass this limit. But I'm used to bypass it because for me, I need to grab all the metadata. I don't care about the limit of Salesforce.
Yeah. Last question, then we have to leave.
Since there's an API, are you aware of any third-party tooling that uses the API for giving you maybe more graphical user interface?
No, after you have to go for documentation. After it depends what language you like. For me, I will work with the API with Java, so I use the SOAP API. If you're more on JavaScript, it will be the REST API, a REST API type. After, it's very well documented. So many developers are used to work with really the API part, and it's very well documented by Salesforce. But it was not the subject of today. We really wanted to go for a more admin. But for North Africa Dreaming, we are planning to have a more developer session for tooling API. How we use it as developers, but it will be really for developers, this one.
So let's grab a coffee and speak about it further if you want.
And if you have questions, you can come to us during the day. We will be more than happy to answer. Thanks a lot.